Take 2. There are few times in your life where you set aside a day knowing for sure that it's going to be the start of something new. There are even fewer times where you wake up knowing that you're going to remember every little trace that the next 24 hours brings. The smells, the sounds, the movements around you, captivated by each and every little thing that you see and hear, embedding that memory into your heart and into your mind forever. Those days come rare. They're one in a million, really, and if you're lucky enough for life to hand you these situations, you might just happen to catch onto them once or twice. The most important thing to remember when a day like this comes along is to pay attention and enjoy the feeling, because it will become a memory you look back on for the rest of your life. Whether it's with pride, happiness, or sorrow, it will stay with you forever. This was one of those days. Through the window, casting a shadow of red against Ryan's delicate features. She wasn't a fan of the sun waking her up, and yet every morning she'd wake the same way, screeching at it unhappily as it blinded her with its light, warning her that if she didn't get up soon, it'd just go ahead and continue to shine against her face until she did. She let out a soft whine as her hand went up to shade her eyes, protecting them from the obnoxious light so that she could pretend for just a few more minutes that she was asleep still. No such luck. Usually she was tired. In fact, tiredness came along to her a lot these days, especially with the long days at school and the constant explaining and lectures from her family and friends. How did you manage to get pregnant? Is it true Eddie Covington is the father? What do his parents think about it? Is it a boy or a girl? Are you keeping it? Why don't you just get it taken care of? I totally knew there was more between you two. Eddie's a fox. All those comments mixed with stares from her teachers as she tried to explain that she was just trying to get as much work done as possible before the baby came, was enough to leave her wanting to sleep each and every moment she wasn't being hounded away. But not today. No. Today was about way more than sleep, and considering the anticipation she'd been feeling for it the past few days, the fact that she was awake now, and the day was finally here, was enough to make her pull her hand from her eyes and welcome the morning with a smile. Baby, she mumbled to her stomach as she rubbed it softly in small circles, today you're getting your photo taken. She felt a soft rumble in her stomach, much like gas, but knew from enough of the baby book she'd been reading that it was more just the baby moving. This never ceased to make her smile. Most said you didn't feel the baby moving till the 3rd or 4th month, but if you experienced a gas-like feeling in your stomach, that generally it was the baby twisting around. She'd been feeling gas for a week now, which only meant one thing to her. Their little baby was wiggling and saying hello. July 22nd, 11:59 p.m. Waiting for Eddie to come and pick her up was one of the most painfully annoying things she'd ever done. She had to have looked at the clock at least 12 times before it finally reached the desired time, the time he was supposed to be there to pick her up. Her mother sat with her on the couch, holding her hands in her own as she talked over with her all the things she was to expect. Are you sure you don't want me to come, sweetie? I'll sit in there with you and give you some support. Usually Ryan would have jumped on this. All this was new and crazy and completely unventured territory, but something about it all was bringing out the woman in her, the independent, mature person that she could be, and in being that girl, it meant doing this alone. Her mum was finally starting to accept everything that was happening, and she was grateful for that, but for now she just wanted to share this day with Eddie. She didn't need any more pressure. She didn't need her mother's mood to change from high to low, all in a matter of seconds, and she wasn't quite sure yet that she trusted it with her. I'm sure, Mum. I think for now I need to do this part by myself. She knew her mum didn't quite understand, but she couldn't explain it any better if she tried. It's not that she didn't appreciate the effort or the love or support she was being given. She just needed to do this on her own. We'll probably get some lunch after, and then we'll be back. I'll have the photos for you. Maybe even a video if we can do that. Do they do that? Her question was interrupted with a knock at the door, a knock that made her practically leap off the couch and scream for him to come in. Eddie, she yelled, bouncing and beaming inside as she rushed to welcome him. She'd become quite motherly in the last few days, and so as usual she greeted him with a big hug before kissing his cheek to say hello. We missed you, she continued, patting her stomach before looking back at her mum with a smirk. Even Mum said you should have been here last night. We watched The Wedding Singer. We missed your amazing rendition of Adam Sandler's song." Her mum just grinned, nodding as she went to hug Eddie hello too. Ryan just didn't sing it quite as well. She tried, though. Believe me, she tried. It had taken some time for her mum to start finally getting back to normal with Eddie. Or well, as normal as you can be with the son you never had being the father of your baby's daughter. Your daughter's baby, sorry. Thankfully, though, with each day that passed, they were becoming more and more like they used to be. Her mum teasing him mercilessly before cooking them both up some food, and then doing whatever it was she needed to be doing, which lately involved more sleep than not. 30 p.m. It was different than she imagined it to be. In her mind it had seemed like a scary white wall and white floored room, filled with judging and disappointed doctors who would sneer at her for the whole situation the second they saw her age. But what she was actually met with when she walked in through those doors, with Eddie by her side, was smiles. Warm smiles, pregnant ladies, all with a knowing glow laced upon their faces, a nod of acceptance too as she walked up to the front desk, telling them who she was, and that she was indeed there. "Ryan, we've been expecting you. I'll just call and let the doctor know you're both here," the blonde receptionist said as she handed her a form to fill out with her details. "She won't be a second, dear." Ryan couldn't help but grin, taking Eddie's hand up from her side before bringing it to her lips to kiss it very softly in a loving, affectionate way. July 22nd, 11:48 p.m. So now that you're getting over the morning sickness for the most part and starting to feel a little better, I want you to start exercising more. Now I don't mean Taebo or kickboxing or any of that hardcore stuff you're thinking. Ryan laughed softly. She had indeed been thinking of the most hardcore exercise she probably could have as the lady had spoken. "You mean I can't wear one of those sumo costumes over my belly?" she mumbled to Eddie, leaning into him with a smile as the lady continued on. "I mean walking, light aerobics, some yoga." The doctor's hand was now reaching out for Ryan's as well as Eddie, who was at this point sitting in the chair smiling like a madman as he nodded along with everything the doctor said, completely invested in her words. "And Dad, your part in this is just as big as Mum's. You need the exercise to get pumped up for the upcoming month, and you need to motivate Mum. She needs you right now. Maybe take a walk around the neighborhood together. Buy some nice relaxing exercise videos. I can write you down a few that are really effective at nearing and during the second trimester." The thought of her and Eddie sitting in their living room, stretching out and getting into strange positions following the instructional video was enough to make Ryan giggle out loud. She couldn't help herself. Eddie and her doing yoga together, it really was just too much. She wondered if they'd have to stretch out on mats too, she wondered if she'd have to stretch out on mats too, do it like she'd seen in those TV shows with the whole inner peace relaxation aspect. If Eddie started humming and holding his hands up, she was going to pee her pants. "Now, Mum, let's see that baby of yours," the doctor said, smiling knowingly at them both as she reached out for Ryan. "I'm just going to get you to lay down on the bed here. Don't worry about your feet. They can go on too." Ryan smiled shyly, looking at Eddie before back at the doctor. How she'd known that Ryan was nervous about putting her feet up on the nice clean treatment bed, she had no idea. But apparently she did. In a way this made her fear ease. If this lady already had them figured out, then maybe they weren't as rare to come by as she thought. "Just like this?" Ryan asked shyly, suddenly very aware of her surroundings and every little movement she made. 11:59 p.m. Yes, 11:59 p.m. Sorry. "Now this might feel a little cold, Ryan. I just need you to bear with me, okay? It won't be so bad in a minute." The doctor was right. The second the sticky, clear gel was spread upon her swollen little stomach, she immediately shivered. Cold was one thing, freezing was another. "Gosh!" she whispered, shivering slightly as goosebumps crawled up and down her arms. "I should get used to seeing that reaction, but I still laugh every time," the lady said, smiling at both of them as she picked up a small probe, bringing it to rest on her stomach very softly. Immediately sound erupted in the room as noises of sloshing and vibrations played. "My stomach is loud," Ryan said to Eddie, winking at him as she squeezed his fingers with her own softly. "Almost as loud as your mouth," she swore she heard Eddie mumble, but he covered it well with his hand over his face as he looked in wonder at the screen. waiting for the moment they'd been anticipating for weeks. Slowly but surely, as the probe moved further over her stomach, they began to hear a very soft, almost unrecognizable sound. "Do you know what that is?" the doctor asked, smiling widely at Ryan and Eddie as she held the probe in one spot, pointing to the screen. "That's your baby's heartbeat." Tears were already flooding to her eyes, before the doctor sorry. Tears were already flooding to her eyes well before the doctor had actually spoken. Somewhere inside of her, the second that sound had emerged, through all the stomach static, no matter how soft it was, she'd known. It was distant and hidden at first, but as the probe moved, so did the sound, becoming more and more noticeable and apparent. His fingers were practically Her fingers were practically killing Eddie's own, squeezing for dear life as tears of joy swept down over her cheeks. Their baby, her little boy or girl, was in there, heart beating, moving around at this very moment in time, and she was listening. They were listening. It was the most miraculous, beautiful experience of her life, that little beat playing in her ears, never leaving them as she sucked in the moment, recording it for life. "Now see this right here?" the doctor asked them both again as she brought her hand up to point the screen. Ryan's eyes locked with Eddie in wonder before moving back to the screen, completely immersed in everything that was going on. Now sitting on the black screen was a video of her stomach, and right in the center, wiggling around on its own as it cradled in the womb, was the little miracle. If she'd thought she was crying before, it was nothing on what she was doing now. Outright blubbering, her smile shining as bright as the morning sun that had woken her just hours ago. July 22nd, 11:26 p.m. Pulling up into the small parking lot of the family obstetrician, the one that her mother had spent weeks convincing her was the best person for the job, was nerve-wracking. Though she was excited as ever, she couldn't help but feel the tiny burst of fear that came from seeing your baby for the first time. Would it be healthy? Would it be happy? Could a baby in your stomach even be happy? She danced a little in her seat, waiting for Eddie to park the car, before reaching for her door. Fortunately for her, Eddie was already on the side of the car, swinging it open and holding out a hand to her. It was a funny sight to see her best friend of years waiting on her the way he was, but nonetheless it made her smile. He'd really picked up into the fatherhood role the last few weeks, doting on her every moment he could, trying to make sure she and the baby were as comfortable as possible. And as strange as it was, she was starting to get used to it. Well, at least somewhat. "Nervous?" he asked her, his voice ringing with its own little anxiety as he took her hand, helping her out of the car, not letting it go for 1 second as he closed the door and locked it again behind them. He was smiling ear to ear, practically bouncing on his toes much the way she was, but she could tell behind those eyes were elements of fear. This was new for them, and even more so completely unexpected. The way he'd stepped up and seemed to take full responsibility was an action she doubted anyone else in his shoes would have been able to take. But then again, he never was quite like anyone else. "Little bit," she answered, beaming at him, as she arched her back just enough to stretch while walking. The car had a way of making her feel cramped, which was odd, because she never used to feel that way before. She guessed it was just one of those subconscious mother things that came along when you finally did get pregnant. Hormones and all that jazz. I didn't read it too fast. I was trying to get through it so that I could continue cooking, but I wanted to make sure that I uploaded it for you first. So I hope it was okay. I'm sorry if I read it stupidly. But yeah, I love you, and I hope you liked it. Love you.